Let's talk a little bit about the tones, and the tones are difficult, and I totally get it. So we're gonna try to spend a little bit more effort on the tones, and we'll also take a look at the tones, and I'll try to explain it a little bit differently, which I shared in the handout that I shared with you guys in a homework. So let's take a look at the tones first. So first about tones, when you've learned the tones, it might be you might have seen something like this, and you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have first tone, second tone, third tone, fourth tone, and I kind of want to change the way to explain this a little bit, just a little bit history. This is developed by Mr. Zhao Yuanren, which is a pretty famous Chinese scholar in 1920s. So it's about 100 years old. And a lot of people are struggling with tones. A lot of people are using that system to explain tones for a long time. So maybe we can try something a little bit more different. So this is like mainly based on the music staff, and just take this music staff part out, and that's kind of like what you see. What I want to do is to simplify the system a little bit, because I'm pretty sure like nobody knows where exactly is 3 or 2 or 4, like what anything in between are, and probably you guys don't even know what 1 and 5 is supposed to be when you're actually pronouncing. So let's take a look at my alternative. So here, I put that in a table. So we have a first tone, second tone, third tone, fourth tone. Instead of putting them into 5 different degrees, I'm just separating them into high and low. Okay, so high pitch sound, low pitch sound. And if we take a look on the first tone, it should be pretty straightforward. It should be a high pitch sound. It starts high and it stays high. And so you want to make sure the majority of the problem is that number one, you don't start the tone high enough. Number two is that it finishes at high pitch. A lot of times, a lot of common mistake is that you start high and then you let the tone drop, and then it's gonna sound like fourth tone, or you didn't start the tone high enough, and it's not gonna sound like first tone. So I'm gonna talk more about that later. Second tone is going to be you start low and you go high. Okay. So if you notice that I didn't draw this as a straight line, I draw this as a curvy line because after many I looked at the this thing called a spectrogram or Mel spectrogram, which shows the pitch change when you are pronouncing, and I noticed that in order to establish that you are starting at a low point, usually you spend a little bit more time in the low frequency domain, just so that people can hear it started from low frequency, low pitch, and then it's going up. Okay, so again, the key is you start low, and in order to establish that like you're starting low clearly, you want to stay in a low range for a little bit longer. We're talking about like milliseconds. So I think you don't need to try to like fully comprehend that part. Just like try to stay in a low pitch a little bit longer, just ever so slightly, and then you go up. All right, and then fourth tone is going to be pretty straightforward as well. You're gonna start high, and the same theory. You wanna stay in the high pitch domain for a little bit longer, and then the pitch is gonna fall off quickly and gonna go to very low. All right, I'm gonna talk a little bit about third tone a little bit later. So as of now, I think it's pretty. I think it should be pretty simple. We don't have like many variables. We only have two variables. One is high pitch, one is low pitch. And the other variable is that how it's going to be changing from low to high to low, or stay high. All right. So so what is high? How high is your high pitch? So your high pitch, you can try to create something for your own reference. What I usually recommend is to use an enthusiastic high. When you see a friend across the street and you want to like get that person's attention, and like you're good friends, all right, and you want to scream at that person, like say hi, in order for the sound to travel across the street, usually you would use a very high pitched sound, because high pitched sound travels better than low pitched sound. Okay, so you're going to do that high. And what is a low pitched sound? Low pitched sound you can use in English like well, or that's kind of like your natural low pitched sound, and so you can use that as a reference. All right, so any questions so far? Oh yeah, or like bruh. All right, so that is a low pitch sound. Okay, so now you have a high pitch kind of like clearly defined, and you have a low pitch clearly defined. Okay, so high, and then let's put that kind of like with the first tone, it's gonna be E, high, E. But pay attention, like when you're saying high, it's a little bit different, because the high doesn't sustain in the high pitch range. And if you take an E, it's going to sound like fourth tone, because high, the pitch falls down. So you're just using high to find how high like you should be singing. So the first tone, if you're not very comfortable with that yet, it's going to very much sound like probably feel like you're singing opera kind of, because you have to make an effort to make the note sustain in a high pitch range. All right. And somebody said high pitch is that what happens when you scare someone and they squeak like eek. Okay, so eek, that's like have a long sustained high pitched sound. All right. So again, the key is you have to meet both criteria. So number one, it's high pitch. Number two, it sustains relatively longer. All right, and then second is let's find the low. Well, and then go up. Like you have to go up all the way to high. Well, you have to go that high, right? So, for an example is like a by. For second tone, by, and then E, right? For the first tone, by, it should be but. Well, but by, you have to go all the way up, right? And then for the fourth tone, let's say 去, it's a fourth tone, and E, and then you have to go 去 all the way down. Okay, this is a little bit not when I'm pronouncing like this, it's a little bit unnatural, but when you're actually speaking, if you're like when you get more fluent later on, you don't have to speak that slow. But the key is that you have to have that range there for people to hear clearly which tone you're speaking. And sometimes people like try to speak very fast, and when they're not comfortable with the tones, they just want to get over it. Which is going to be like counterproductive, because the faster you speak, the more difficult to actually hear the range, because it went by so quickly, and you probably didn't pronounce the full range of change from low to high, or from high to low, or you didn't like the pitch doesn't sustain long enough. So it's gonna be very difficult for us to hear both first, second, and fourth tone. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about third tone. Third tone is a little bit more complicated. And third tone, I'm gonna define it as we have to introduce this now. here is a hidden layer that is a mid part. So let me move this out of the way. All right, so we have high, low, and for the third tone, I'm going to introduce the mid pitch here for the sake of explanation. So third tone, we're going to start kind of like at mid or low, go to the bottom, and you imagine that's like a basketball. It's going to bounce right up, and it's not going to bounce up all the way to the highest pitch. So it's gonna bounce back to middle part. So first, for the most part, it's staying at the like low pitch domain, but it is changing. It's gonna bounce all the way down to the bottom, and then because the pitch goes very low, and when you're saying low pitch things, one of the things naturally happen is that the volume is going to decrease as well. It's difficult for us to pronounce a low pitch sound very loud, especially in speaking. So it's going to be, the volume is going to cut off a little bit in the middle when you reach to the bottom. So you can even put a pause in between. Okay, so example would be, for example, 走. All right, so you're not going to start very high. You're going to start in the middle, 走, and then go all the way to the bottom where like almost the sound's going to naturally disappear, 走, and then go up a little bit, 走, oh. And then you're not going all the way up. You're not say 走, oh. It's going to sound kind of unnatural. So 走, just a quick bounce back up. All right, and a lot of times when you're actually pronouncing in a sentence, in a context, the bouncing up part, a lot of times is just omitted. Okay, so for example, a lot of times we have 我, right, in the sentence, 我. And 我是, for example, 我是, you don't really say 我是. You would just say the first half, 我是, 我, and then just start from the mid and go all the way to the lowest part, and then it's kind of like fades out, 我是. So when you're putting everything into context, the difficult part is that you have to be like resetting the pitch accurately for each new sound, for each syllable, basically. So after say 我, right, you have to jump right up to the highest and go for the 是, because you have to start here. So if you say 我 and then you didn't high enough, it might sound a little bit strange. But this is again kind of like for beginner practice. In real life, things gonna be a little bit different, and you might not have to be that accurate. But this is another way, like my attempt to explain tones to you guys. So when you are reading for the homework, so let's maybe jump to this one. This is the assignment. Okay, so going back to the notes here, first tone is going to be high pitch, relatively long sustain, make it sound a little bit longer, and make sure the pitch stays high and doesn't fall off. I put the 2 dash on the low domain part so that, it's kind of like visually elevated. If I didn't put anything there, I feel it's kind of weird. So that's why I put the dots here on the first tone. And for the third tone, I also put 2 dots here to indicate the third tone is in a low pitch domain. And then second tone, low to high. First half kind of like stays low. You have to establish clearly that it's from the low pitch range. And then second half go up quickly to the high pitch. And for the third and the fourth, second and fourth tone, towards the end, it's going to be naturally like fading. The sound's going to fade out or just like stops. Third tone, we just talked about it, bounces back slightly at the lowest pitch, and then you can add a small pause in between, or you don't have to. Sometimes some people do. I looked at the audio samples. Some people do, some people don't. So you can just try and see what is more comfortable for you. And the last one is from high to low. And the fourth tone is relatively short because when you go when you go to the low pitch part, like you can't produce the sound very long, and then it's gonna naturally like more like kind of comes to a stop.